click on the full screen icon on the upper right side of the video area. Hitting the escape key will bring you back to the regular view. When you leave this event, you'll automatically be taken to a quick 2-question survey. We'd love to get your feedback. This event will be recorded, and we'll be sending a link to the archive to all of today's participants within the next couple of weeks. Today, I will start us off with a brief introduction to Enterprise and the Climate and Cultural Resilience Program. Then I'll hand it over to our moderator, Maya Sharfi, to have a conversation with Marilyn Wren and Taikum Ibiji. For those who aren't familiar with Enterprise, we are a national nonprofit in the housing community development field. We invest in the design and development of high-quality housing, but we also know that housing alone isn't enough to connect people to the resources and support they need to build healthy lives and experience upward economic mobility. This is why we also invest in strategies that build local capacity and uplift residents' voices in the development process. Research and experience have shown that investing in cultural expression and creative processes can lead to important community development outcomes. It can strengthen trust and make communities more resilient. It can benefit the local economy and build community wealth. It can also contribute to a built environment that honors and reflects residents' voices and vision. In 2017, we received support from the Kresge Foundation to explore, in particular, the role of culture and creativity in increasing community resilience. We launched the Climate and Cultural Resilience Grant Program so that we could learn more about what these concepts of culture, resilience, and creative placemaking mean in specific contexts. We partnered with grantees in Atlanta, Chicago, Duluth, West Virginia, and San Francisco. We have a number of blog posts and resources on our website you can check out to learn more about what we do. And later this fall, we will be releasing 2 new publications that highlight these case studies and lessons of the 5 Cultural Resilience grantees, as well as our Collaborative Action grantees. We'll share that announcement with everyone who registered for this webinar. Now I'm going to turn it over to Maya Sharfi, founder of the design research firm Creative Agency. Maya is a thinker and a doer in social impact design and creative placemaking. She is one of our creative partners who has worked with us to develop some of the existing tools and resources that you can find on our website. We invited her to join us to moderate a series of conversations about the integration of culture and creativity in community development. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you so much, Frederick. So happy that you're here today. Our conversation today actually ties into something one of our panelists from our last webinar, Miri Villiard, said. She said, we care about the future of the project, but we also care about the future of the planet. But sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes the needs that are urgently in front of the residents in our communities, like violence, displacement, deportation, and job insecurity, those needs make the future of the planet seem so much less pressing in contrast. And that's exactly the tension that we're going to explore today. So today we're going to bring you 2 efforts that face that tension and we think have a lot to teach the field in terms of resolving that tension. We're going to have a really real and honest conversation, but also provide you with fresh ideas and fresh ways of looking at this tension in terms of how you design and execute your programs. We also want to say that this conversation goes both ways. So we do not want to have all of your questions come in at the last minute. We don't want to have you just passively listening. We want you to feel as much as possible as if you're in the room with us. So if a question occurs to you during this conversation, please drop it in the Q&A box that Frederick pointed out to you. But also, if something resonated with you over the course of this conversation, if one of our panelists said something that you're really excited about or aligns with your experience or maybe you're not so sure about, please send us a message, put it in the chat box, really engage yourself in this conversation. This not only makes it more fun for us because it feels like we're not just talking heads, it also makes it better for you and helps you bake in any learnings here. We really want to make sure that these conversations help you move forward. So before we get started, let's test that. I'd like everyone who's out there who's listening to take a minute and type in the chat box, what drew you to today's conversation? Is there one thing that you would love to learn walking out of this conversation? And I'm going to give you a quick moment to do that before we get started jumping in, okay? Okay, so we've set some intentions. I want to introduce you to Marilyn Wren, our first panelist, who's the Chief Development Officer at Coalfield Development. Marilyn has worked in community and economic development in West Virginia and Central Appalachia for nearly 30 years, with a focus on social enterprise development and economic diversification. Coalfield's Hi Marilyn, thank you so much for joining us. Hey. Coalfield's Climate and Cultural Resilience Grant, which was a project funded by Enterprise, focused on addressing deforestation caused by mountaintop removal, coal mining through mountaintop removal, coal mining, and they did that through agroforestry and through arts-based cultural strategies that create jobs. So glad you're here today, Marilyn.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I want to introduce you to Taikum Diviji, who's a program officer with the School for the Art Institute of Chicago's Oaks of North Lawn initiative. Taikum is an administrator and a culture worker. His focus at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago is on creative placemaking, culturally aligned economic development and equity, and Taikum is going to be sharing with us an effort called the Oaks of North Lawndale, which was an Enterprise Collaborative Action grantee. The collaborative actions are meant to be creative and catalytic, and you're going to get to see all of that in play today. And sometimes that catalytic effect can actually shift narratives in communities and make new relationships among issues and tensions. So we're going to get you to dive into that today too.
Hey everybody.
Hey, Taikum.
Hey there.
So I want to start by jumping in with you, Marilyn. Can you tell us a little bit about the community that you work in and what the pressing needs are that the residents you work with face?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, I'm with Coalfield Development, as you said. We're a nonprofit based in Wayne, West Virginia. We work in the southern West Virginia coal counties, Wayne, Lincoln, Mingo, McDowell, Fayette. These are all counties that have been really hard hit by the downturn in the coal economy since about 2000. Well, the downturn has been going on since the 70s, but starting at about 2009, we had a really sharp decline. So our communities are facing a situation where, they were built around a real strong mono economy with very little economic diversification. And so with the decline in the coal jobs, there's really not a lot of other industry for people to move into. So we are facing a situation where folks who've long been told that they have to make a choice between either having jobs or a nice environment to live and work in. They're really trying to move beyond that and try to figure out what's next for their communities. And we work with them to build businesses in these communities, since there are not a lot of employers, and into the enterprises that we've developed, which are designed to have a triple bottom line of economic return, social return, and of course an environmental return. Into these businesses, we directly hire the folks that really need to have the jobs. And we're trying to show that by having a diversified economy that values environmental attributes, for instance, that folks don't have to make that choice between jobs or the environment. We really can have both. So our model is to train the workforce in these enterprise areas, and then also to help them become, more well-rounded people, and to begin diversifying our local economies.
Yeah. So, Marilyn, before Coalfield got started doing its work, or doing its work at least in this way, how is longer-term sustainability and climate sustainability showing up in the conversations that residents were having?
Well, as I said, there's been a really strong push over the years to set up this false dichotomy where you can have jobs or you can have a strong, healthy environment. So a lot of the factors at play in our communities have really been around trying to get people to push back against any sort of diversification. It wasn't so much specific around environmental, destruction, but the narrative really has been around we need to preserve coal jobs. and it's been a pretty strong effort by industry to set up this narrative. And folks, if that's the only thing that you've seen for generation, if that has been the driving force in your community, and you see people starting to suffer as that declines, it makes sense that people would try to figure out what that narrative really means for them. The folks in our neck of the woods, no one likes to live in a place where your water is running orange and your kids are getting cancer.
Right.
But then by the same token, people also want to live in a place that has an economy. So really, by trying to shift the narrative toward broad economic diversification, which is respectful of more than one bottom line, we're starting to see, a shift in how people are approaching, climate and jobs.
Yeah. We're going to dig in more to that because it's a really powerful message. Okay, so Tycoon, tell us about the community that you work in and some of the pressing needs that community residents you work with face.
So I work at the School of the Artists of Chicago, and we are an academic art and design school, and we've been invited into the North Lawndale community, which is 5 miles west of downtown. It's pretty much part of the city, but it still struggles with the urban contradictions of an American city. When I say that, I mean high unemployment rates, high rates of poverty, high rates of mental health and physical health issues, as well as environmentally under-resourced. When I say that, it's also a neighborhood which has one of the lowest tree canopies in the city. It's a 16.6% tree canopy. And you compare that to neighboring Oak Park and River Forest, which is almost at 50%. So we work in a neighborhood that deals with an extraordinary amount of issues, and like how Marilyn mentioned, working and talking to people about jobs and environment is super contradictory. People not necessarily see that when they're thinking about rent, they're thinking about dinner, though trees really matter. So the way we are looking at this is using the environment as a way to create jobs, to create a future skilled workforce that can work in the urban forestry, urban agriculture, and the landscape construction businesses or industries through training in tree keeping, and use that also as a model to reforest their neighborhood.
Yeah, and so I know one of the things that comes up in your neighborhood is that there's a lot of violence, right?
Yeah. It is one of the neighborhoods that could be said it gives Chicago its infamous name. It's the second most violent in terms of gun violence in the city of Chicago. And there are a lot of factors contributing to it, and most importantly is the lack of jobs and the lack of resources available to residents over there. It's a food desert. There is barely any industry. The schools aren't really well funded. So all of those contribute together to the violence and the lack of resources and opportunities that exist there.
Yeah. So it can seem like it's, trees are nice to have when you're facing violence and job insecurity. So tell me a little bit about how your project, walk us through your project and walk us through a little bit of how it came together.
So I'll answer the second. What brought it together is when we were invited to the neighborhood 5 years ago, we did a cultural asset mapping, and we spent about 2 years talking to residents. And the one thing we concurrently heard from everybody was jobs. The lack of jobs, and while they wanted us to start an art and design center, they wanted us to look at it as a way to produce more jobs, the skills needed for the current and the future job markets. And while we were having these conversations, we also were doing studies and understanding the neighborhood, and that's when we realized that North Lawndale has a heat island. It's 10 degrees surface temperature, that 10 degrees higher than the regional average. And talking to neighbors, we would hear about how residents would drive outside the neighborhood, and as soon as they would go to the neighboring park, they would roll their windows down to let all the people get in. And so it's made us think, why can't we have these trees here in North Lawndale? Why can't there be green spaces in North Lawndale that residents enjoy? And that's how we started looking at it from an art lens when we looked at Joseph Beuys, who did the 7,000 Oaks project in Kassel, Germany. And we saw that that's something that we could replicate in the neighborhood, but also being conscious that this is a neighborhood where, and this is a city that's rapidly gentrifying. And so if you were to put trees in here, is this an opportunity for gentrifying forces to look at a new neighborhood, or is this a way where community members can build equity and dig their roots deeper in and stay in the community. So our main aspect with this was that this becomes a project for the community, and all the jobs and all the resources that come out of it go in the neighborhood. And there are multiple ways to do this, and one way that we would envision this project is that we would go and plant trees on the sidewalk between the street and the sidewalk on the medians and just plop trees over there. And the other aspect is going and sharing this with community members and letting them invite us in and see where they can fill themselves in. And so various partnerships have started developing out of this. One of these is with a high school that works with high school dropouts, brings them back into the school system and uses vocational training focused specifically on urban agriculture to get young men and young women their high school accreditation and then get them back into the system. And they have, through the city, they've managed to acquire 6 contiguous vacant lots, and they see this as an opportunity to become an infrastructure for their students, and they want to develop it into a food forest, which is where these students will learn how to plant trees, grow trees, harvest fruits, pack them, and sell them in a neighborhood where there is also lack of fresh fruits available. And so this is one of the examples where we see community members plugging themselves into it. They see that this is this is a project for trees, this is an art project, but there's an opportunity here for them to make it the way they want. And so we spent all of last spring with our architecture students and their high school students collaborating together and developing a design for what that food forest would be. And they used permaculture as the principle to design this food forest. And now on the 12th of October, we're going to plant the first 15 trees in this space. And this is also going to be done by their students and volunteers from the community. So these are the kind of ways we're seeing how they can build it in, rather than us just going in and plopping trees and going out.
Right. Okay, so Tycoon, the Tycoon's effort is a reforestation project that is inspired by an art piece, but it's much bigger than that. They have community partnerships where they're working with vocational programs. They're partnering. It's actually one of the most partnered projects that, Tycoon at one point was telling us about all the partners they work with, and it was like, bullet point, bullet point, bullet. It was like he, could be reading off a scroll that rolled out the door. So that we've got this one effort that's coming out of an arts institution, and then Marilyn's effort is coming out of a traditional community development organization. So Tycoon, can you tell us a little bit about the Joseph Boys project that this was modeled on, and what aspects of that project influenced the project that you're running?
So Joseph Boys was last century was a titan of that period. And in 1982 at Documenta 7, Documenta is a big arts and design exhibition that takes place every 5 years in Kassel, Germany. It started after the World War. And during the war, Kassel was completely deforested. And so as part of this exhibition, he started 7,000 Oaks, where he planted 7,000 diverse trees throughout the city of Kassel, Germany, and over a 5-year period of time, reforesting the city. And when he initially started this project also, he got a lot of opposition because back then in the 80s, there was less knowledge about environmental conditions and people were more worried about parking spaces being obstructed. And so he had a lot of pushback, but over the 5 years, he managed to finish this project, planting a tree, and next to each tree, planting a basalt column signifying natural time. And then the humans forming the... Okay,
wait, actually, I'll just stop you a second. So what he did was he actually took a column of stone and would plant it right next to the tree.
Yes.
Okay, yep.
And so we went to Kassel, Germany with North Lawndale community members about a year ago, and we showed them the project, met with residents who have seen the project over their 50 years of their life, met the Voice Foundation, and all of us and even the community members were wondering, why do we need to put these stones next to them? And or the stone columns next to them. And this is when residents told us, and then the Voice Foundation and the city told us that, as over time, these trees have become sacrosanct to the community. And if anything happens to one of the trees, if it's a lightning strike or one of the trees is dying, community members immediately rally around that tree and say, this is a special tree, we need to take care of it. And instantly there is care given to that tree. It gets this specialness to it. And that's something that when we were talking to, we had Blanche Suggs with us, who leads the North Lawndale Historical Society, and she had come to Kassel and she said, this is something we really need in our neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that has had different communities come and live in it over the last, I have lost you guys. Am I still here? Okay.
Yeah, you're here.
over the last 70, 80 years, other communities have come and managed to build their foundations and lead their milestones behind, and this would be something that we belong to her community, would belong to the Black community of North Lawndale. And so that's one aspect that we really like, that we try to mimic that. And boys use basalt columns. We're using limestone because there's a rich history of limestone in this community and in Chicago. It's a local stone. Does this answer your question, or did I go off?
Yeah. So it isn't just a reforestation project. It's actually inspired by this art piece in Germany, and it's in some ways, and actually there's one more component to it, which is you had a kickoff event, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
So this is a community that has a high gun violence rate. And while we were looking at that, we also found studies that tell us a 12% increase in tree canopy leads to a 10% decrease in crime. And this is, the more you dig into this research, you realize also that it's a spongy science. There are correlating factors. It's not exactly best to prove, but we've heard from community members when they've cleaned up their blocks and started a park there, that all the bad elements get pushed out. That everybody realizes that this is this area that's cared for, residents will take action, and you can't come and mess around over here. And so we wanted to think about that and also call out on the violence. So what we did is we invited Pedro Reyes. He's a Mexican artist up, and he does this project called Palas Pura Pistolas, where he melts weapons and makes them into shovels. So we got confiscated firearms from the city of Chicago. We invited residents, and a lot of residents who had faced trauma of violence and of guns participated in this by writing letters to their loved ones or to the weapons. Some just wrote poetry, some wrote stories, some took opportunities to read those letters out. Others kept them private and wrapped these letters around the gun pieces. And then set up a foundry in the neighborhood in a parking lot, and everybody dropped these guns into the foundry, and we melted these guns down, making us shovel heads.
Oh, yeah. It's like the melt your swords into plowshares.
Exactly. Well, and what has also happened in North Lawndale, if you are familiar with the emerald ash borer beetle, which has been devastating ash trees, North Lawndale's lost a lot of these ash trees. So we went to the park district and got the cut down ash trees and gave them to an organization on the west side called Greater Westtown Training that works with young men and women, teaching them woodworking skills. And they made our shovel handles from dead ash trees. So when you see these handles, you can see where the ash tree the beetle has burrowed through the tree. And then we went to local beekeepers and got beeswax and coated the shovels with beeswax. And then we made these shovels and worked with recently paroled citizens who live in the community and trained them how they would plant these trees and care for them. And they are caring for these first 10 trees that we planted on this day. So it was a complete circle, taking weapons, melting them, taking dead trees, making them handles, bringing insects, bees in for beeswax, and then working with recently paroled citizens and training them to be how to be tree keepers.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, this project is so rich with cultural references, right? You've got the Joseph Beuys art piece in Germany, reforesting a war zone. You are a former war zone. You have melting swords into plowshares, right? And from the Bible. So how important are those cultural references, do you think, to the impact of the project, right? Could this project have happened without that level of cultural resonance? And if it did, what would be missing?
I don't think so. How would people connect with it? It would just be we bringing shovels from Home Depot and saying, okay, let's go plant trees, and then we plant trees and we are out. What's really important for us is we aren't the experts in North Lawndale. We are an art and design institution 5 miles west. We have a classroom and artisan residency space there. But what's really important is that community members find spaces from where they link into this space. So this is a neighborhood which has a lot of understanding of the Bible and the text. So this is something that they can tie into really quickly. They think about trees and they think about life and the reference to how it can be sacrosanct. So these are important elements where people can link into it. And so I would assume you could do the project, but I don't think so. It would have the buy-in and the equity and the necessary need for people to care for these trees. Because of the way this is going, we've had residents now just going about planting trees on their own in their backyard, in their front yards, and calling us and telling us, hey, I planted a tree. Can you make it one of your 7,000? Can we get a stone next to it? And that's really beautiful when that starts happening.
Right, great. Yeah, there's something about you guys are visualizing this connection between urban heat island and lack of trees and violence, right? And you're also doing it in a way that increases job opportunities because of the partnerships that you're making, and also stewardship. So, okay, so Marilyn.
It's amazing.
Marilyn, right?
I always love to hear that work. That is amazing.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's hear about some more amazing work. Walk us through your climate and cultural resilience effort, and specifically that aspect of culture and creativity that was part of it.
Sure. You know, I think what you're saying, Takuma, is so true, that just coming into a community, bringing a solution to the people without the people being bought into the solution, it doesn't work. And we see that time and time again, how that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what we've tried in Appalachia is a lot like that, you know, where people will bring in either a business effort or a business idea and expect people to flock to it in order to, you know, to gain employment, when really what people want to do is to tap into their culture and their native skills. Mm-hmm. And what we are, you know, we're West Virginians, we know what it is. So what we do a lot of in Appalachia and West Virginia is we make things, we grow things, and we fix things. Mm-hmm. And so the enterprises that we've stood up are around those themes. So we have an enterprise in sustainable construction. We're a licensed general contractor. We have a sustainable agriculture enterprise. We work on reclaiming mine land, you know, specifically. There's a picture of some of our mountaintop removal land right now that's being reclaimed with the help of goats, which we love. We do a creative placemaking enterprise that involves a couple of wood shops and a coffee shop. We do solar panel installation, but it's all building on these skills and avocations that people have had that connects them back to the place. So when you're working in our wood shop and you're handling, you know, reclaimed wood that's come from, you know, barns and buildings that include, you know, turn of the century old growth wood, you can see how our crew members view what they're doing as a part of a longer tradition of work. And that's really what we've lost, is this tradition of working for yourself, leading your own destiny, being entrepreneurial. And so through these kind of place-based enterprise ideas, we're reconnecting people back to their working and enterprise past. Just like on our reclaimed mine land, you can see our chickens, pigs, and goats. A lot of people in this area were, you know, they have family history as small-scale farmers, independent growers. And it's amazing, you know, a lot of the people we work with are young adults, but invariably when we take them to an agriculture site, they have stories about remembering visiting their grandma and grandpa or great-grandma and grandpa out on the farm doing this type of work. So it gives us that cultural connection with them, and then it opens up room for us to talk about why we have, what role the chickens are playing in re-nourishing the soil that's been devastated by, you know, the industry practices, which have left these, you know, hundreds of acres of basically moonscape soil. So we can talk about how, you know, how we want healthy forests to come back, and the role of, you know, a goat in eating an invasive species so it can make room for a native species. So it's a way into these broader conversations, again, breaking down that narrative that we've just been fed for so long, where you have to choose between a job and the environment. Now we're seeing that, you know, we're showing hands-on how that's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about one of your efforts, which is you guys started a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how that arose and what the conversation was like around it.
Sure. One of our strategies in working with communities is to help a community identify a vacant or abandoned building that they see as a liability, whether it's, you know, it's been sitting there as a reminder of how bad times have become, or it's attracting crime and people are using it, you know, for drug dealings, and, you know, that people really don't like to have these empty storefronts in their communities. So in identifying these buildings and then talking to the community about what they want to see, what it would look like to the community if this liability were to become an asset. You know, we did this process in a town called Wayne, West Virginia. It's a town of 2,600 people. It's a county seat in a coal-impacted community. And the building that we identified had a past in manufacturing, then it was a five and dime, then it went out of business, and people, you know, it had an emotional connection to it. But we knew that one of the things that we wanted to see for the community, and the community had told us they wanted, number one, was affordable housing.
Okay.
We were able to work and develop affordable housing units for the upper floors of this. They also wanted community space for their housing development authority, their family resource network, and so we were able to work that into the plans. And the final thing that the community wanted was a coffee shop, a place to sit down and have a snack, have a cup of coffee, have a business meeting. They could see that in other rural places and not non-rural places, the coffee culture was something that they didn't have access to, and that they wanted that. So we said, oh, okay, you know, that's very doable. And we built Trout Hill Coffee in the front of this building, and it was crowdfunded. The community stepped up and donated to the build out of it. A local family with deep roots there saw to it that, you know, it was funded, and it took a while, but as the community was watching this building become alive, they could see members from their community in there building the coffee shop that the community said they wanted. And kind of like what you were talking about, Takuma, it's like the community is bought in and they're coming alive. And I think it's analogous to when you see the community planting their own trees, when we see the community stepping up to come in and saying, how can I help? You know, how soon can I be in here? How soon can I have that first cup of coffee? It's the same type of thing. It's a point of pride. It's a point of engagement then for other development. So, you know, we do hear about how hard it is for, you know, small business to exist in rural areas because we don't have a large population. And that's true. It is difficult. But, you know, if a community feels bought in, they will support, you know, what it is they've identified as wanting, whether it's less violence, you know, whether it's more economic opportunity or jobs. So, yeah, you'll have to come out and check it out someday.
Yeah, I'll look forward to having a cup of coffee.
It's really good. It's amazing as well. They look so cute.
Yeah, that's why there's so many cat photos on the internet. So it sounds like in both of your efforts, there's actually a deep grounding in a cultural narrative. And it's not dropped in from above. It's actually created, right? It's co-created by people who are there and also with the partners that they're working with your organizations. And as a result, part of what happens is there's buy-in, which allows these efforts to actually move forward and gain momentum that maybe wouldn't have happened if it was top down, or if it wasn't as deeply grounded in the cultural narrative that people who are there are generating on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's completely true. You know, I know for our area where, you know, for a lot of our state's history, we've been seen as a source of resources. We're built on extractive economies. In a lot of ways, we've been a colony inside of the United States where we haven't owned the businesses. You know, we don't necessarily even own the land. 73% of the land in West Virginia is owned and controlled by outside sources. So there's some, you know, limits to what people can do to help change, you know, the structure of how enterprise is going to happen in our state. But the more people that we can work with to give them the skills through education, to give them the skills through on-the-job training, and to give them the confidence through personal development, the more people that we can touch and show, you know, what self-ownership and self-direction can look like that's culturally appropriate and bubbling up from what they want to see for their communities, the better, because that will lead to the diversification. That will lead to more people responding to local need and filling those niches without waiting for other businesses from the outside to come in and fill them for us.
So we are getting some great questions, and just a reminder that if you have questions or if anything's resonating with you, questions, put them in the chat, in the Q&A box. Comments, please put them in the chat box. So one of the questions that we've got is that surfacing conflicting priorities or tensions is often a positive outcome, but it's also important to move past the surfacing of the tension and to actually celebrate it and set it aside and then actually move forward. So let me actually ask you, Marilyn, are there moments in your effort where you feel like tensions have arisen, and what has been your process of moving past them?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely tensions in our work. When we're talking, when we get this question a lot, because when people hear that we are working on developing solar installation, training people in solar installation in the heart of coal company, there's a projection that that's going to cause a lot of tension. Mm-hmm. What we find is that the real tension in our communities is around trust. It's around being able to self-direct and self-identify solutions. And our strategy as an organization is to just basically keep on down the road with, look, how we got here, what has happened in the past is one thing, but we all can agree on a few things. We can agree that we need to have a more diverse economy. We can agree that we all need jobs. We can agree that we need to up our education to move forward. And by concentrating on those things, and if there's folks on either side, that still want to deal with the conflict and to deal with, basically a he said, she said in terms of a situation, then they can do that. But, we're going to stand here and we're going to keep poking on and pushing on what we know is true. And the more that we are able to concentrate on our narrative of diversified economy, education, and creating jobs, then we find that the conflict kind of falls to the side. Mm.
Yeah, okay. A question for you, Taikung. So in this work, you don't want to just design a community, right? That's the wrong way to do it. Instead, you want to attract and work with and invite people in, but that may actually change the nature of the effort. So is there a moment where the effort that you started out, was there a moment where things shifted because of the reality on the ground, and who came to the project?
I think this project, it's just been I think it's going to be a continuously shifting project. I think when we look at Boys in Kassel, Germany, and if we say we want to replicate that, he wasn't doing fruit trees, he was just planting trees on the sidewalk in between the street and the medium, and that's how the original project is, and that's how we sort of started to think about this. And we had a moment of learning about 1.5 years, much before our kickoff. We made this presentation, and we take this presentation and go everywhere, and we go to blog groups and churches and schools. And this presentation had all the information in terms of research, all the benefits of the trees and carbon dioxide and oxygen and asthma relief and everything in it. It was very packed and full presentation, and we were taking it around, and we were at this high school presenting it to the faculty and staff. And after we finished the presentation, the president of the high school, Dr. Myra Sampson, looked at us and said, "This is great. Where do we fit in?" And that's when we realized that we might have everything really well designed and thought about, and we might think we've covered everything, but there's always going to be somebody else finding it not porous enough for themselves to enter in. And that's when we really changed our strategy of how to approach this and realize that anybody who wants to come in this is going to make it the way they see it, or the way they want it, and is the most beneficial to them, despite all the environmental benefits and all other associated benefits, health benefits, everything else. And so, yeah, it's an everyday process. I speak to people and they say, hey, there's a small school, and when when their students graduate from 8th grade and move on to high school, they want to plant trees as a marker for those students so they can track their growth over 4 years as the tree grows. And that's something we never thought about, as using a tree to track a high school student's growth and how they graduate from 8th grade and go to high school and then move on. And they want to use that as a way of like measuring height, but as something else as this tree. And so it's an ever-changing project for us. It's whatever you want to make with it. And we have changed the approach to it, where we have made our approach much more porous, where our presentation has all the facts, but has more spaces that, hey, this is a gap where you could come in, this is a gap where you could come in, or tell us how you see yourselves plugging in over here. So I think that's super important, especially when you're going into a community and you want people to buy in. We don't want to just plant trees and leave these. We want residents to care for these trees. Think about that. This is my tree. This is my personal tree. This is my baby's tree. And that there is that instant buy-in and equity that remains in the community with it.
Yeah, yeah. So another question for you, Tycoon, since this project is so highly partnered, what role has the local government, so I guess the city of Chicago, played in it? Have they been a driver, an active partner, a passive supporter? How are you seeing local government showing up?
They have been very supportive of this project. We actually got a Department of Cultural Affairs grant for this kickoff event as well, and some of the free work that we're doing. The alderman is a big supporter of this project and is trying to help us get resources and also connect to various groups, community members, and spaces. The mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, knows of this project and has told us that as trees from their forestry department are planted in the neighborhood, they will let us know that their trees are planted and we could go and mark them and make them part of the project. So the city is really receptive to the project. They see this as infrastructure development, but also benefit and community development for their neighborhoods. So yeah, they've been really great with this.
That's great. That's really great. Okay, Marilyn, back to you. What does scaling look like? Scaling your efforts look like? And you know, I love that you're talking about shifting from a pattern of just extraction, right? Wealth leaves the community produces, but the wealth leaves, to shifting that narrative. So what does scale and growth look like for your program? And also, what do you need from the rest of the world, potentially even listeners who are listening here right now, to support your efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. We know a couple things. We know that our program right now, by directly hiring and underemployed people into our programs, making them our employees through our social enterprises, and then working with them intensely on small crews with mentors for 3 years. That's the length of time we have our trainees. We know that is incredibly relational. We know that it takes a long time and it's expensive. And we know that creating a business in West Virginia for anyone is challenging. For a nonprofit to do it in areas where there is very little economic diversification, that brings a whole other set of challenges, but also opportunities. To scale this, what we're thinking about is working with other nonprofit organizations across the region in an initiative we're calling SEED, which stands for Social Entrepreneurism and Economic Diversification. So we're trying to find other nonprofit partners that will engage with us in social enterprise, either through one that we've already created or something that's appropriate for their region. Maybe they want to start a little bakery. Maybe they have a need for a daycare. But we see that the nonprofit organizations make good partners with us, and they make it possible for us to create scale regionally that's appropriate for their constituents. So we're going to start piloting this probably in 2019. We have a couple of partners right now. So we're really excited about that. And also, while we're doing that, it would build the capacity of other nonprofits throughout the state to engage in what other work that they're doing in terms of supporting social infrastructure. So, what we need, like any business, is customers for our products and services. And we know in order to be successful, we are going to have to continue to reach out to urban markets and markets outside of our state for our goods and services. Just as an example, we recently had a sale with the Pittsburgh Children's Museum for wooden desks and tables and displayed in their sales area, for instance. And as more nonprofits engage in social enterprise, they're also going to need to find these customer bases, which we can help them with. But if people want to reach out to us to see how they might become a customer of one of our enterprises, that would be phenomenal. And I don't know if you have our information on here somewhere, but you know, I can show you a business card or get connected somehow.
Yeah, so I think we've actually got to close up, but you can reach out to Marilyn via the Coalfield Development's website, I believe.
Yes.
And you can also reach out to Tycoon. You can connect to Tycoon through the School of the Art Institute. If you want to be the proud owner of a shovel made from gardens that have been melted down, symbolizing this project and everything that's taking off in North Lawndale. You can also, I know Tycoon and their effort are also offering sales of those shovels. So we've got to close here, but I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. I feel like we could have talked for so much longer, and I know I'm leaving inspired, and I think many out there are doing that as well. This is just one of the many conversations that we are having about how to do creative placemaking, how to shift your community through integrating arts and culture, and do that hand in hand with community residents and not for community residents. So please come back if you're interested, follow the series, and if you want more examples of how to do creative, collaborative, or community-driven projects, you can also go to community/how/to/guides.org. Oh, excuse me, no slashes. communityhowtoguides.org, which has a growing library of guides on how to do creative placemaking and all kinds of other creative and catalytic community services via enterprise. So thank you everyone so much for being here today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, it's time to conclude today's session. I just want to acknowledge one more time the support from Kresge Foundation for making this possible. And a big thanks to our panelists who came up and joined us for this conversation today. We hope to see you again soon at our next Creative Placemaking webinar. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us.